Really tragic story, actually, but something that we've certainly seen before. 20 bodies were found on Monday, publicly displayed. It was definitely sending a message. We're going to get into exactly what happened and what the message is that's being sent here. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Katarina Szulc, and this is Borderland Dispatches, an IRONCLAD original. All right, so 20 bodies were found in Culiacán, Sinaloa on Monday, 4 of them decapitated, hanging from a bridge. We have seen this time and time again over the past decades during the war on drugs, the cartel wars across all of Mexico. But we've seen this uptick since the capture and subsequent arrest of El Mayo last summer. This uptick in, obviously, infighting. We've talked about this time and time again, but extremely brutal daylight violence across a lot of Sinaloa. This is kind of the topic that got me into this reporting because it runs very deep. So the Sinaloa State Prosecutor's Office reported this grisly scene on Monday. 4 headless bodies, 16 bodies were discovered inside an abandoned vehicle near Culiacán, and 5 human heads inside a bag. There was also a narcomanta on the vehicle, so a message to the rival cartel, and a narcomanta, I think, on the bridge. It's a little hard to read the full manta, but it is targeted to Iván Archibaldo, the son of El Chapo Guzman. So this certainly was a message from likely El Mayo's faction of the cartel to Los Chapitos. Now, Feliciano Castro is the government spokesperson for Sinaloa, and he obviously condemned the killings and said authorities need to examine their strategy for tackling organized crime due to the magnitude of violence seen. I mean, yeah, tell me something we don't know. People's lives are horribly affected by this ongoing violence. We've been knowing that there is a need for systemic change, a change in how authorities deal with it in terms of how cartels are perceived, the level of justice that's received for these kinds of crimes. When we hear about these cases, we rarely actually see a perpetrator end up in jail or being charged for this very crime. You know, we hear about the headless bodies hanging from bridges in headlines, but we never see a headline that says so-and-so is responsible and now has subsequently been charged for their involvement or their role in these bodies hanging from the bridge, okay? Now, this violence obviously peaked after the arrest of El Mayo Zambada in July. We know what happened, right? I mean, there were rumors, theories at first where people were saying, well, he was set up by the Chapitos, he was set up by the US government. This was a ploy. It was essentially kingpin strategy in its truest form, okay? Dismantle the leaders. So first we went for El Chapo Guzman, who was extradited to the US in 2017 and sentenced to life in prison in 2019. That left a void in the Sinaloa cartel. His sons really leveled up and took over. And then last year, you have Zambada end up in the United States in a private jet, like a little, actually, like more light aircraft. But this was certainly a measure that the United States took, likely. Okay, this is all alleged, right? But if we really look at this in the big picture of things and how we're probably going to read about it in history books on cartel violences, this was a measure to fragment and disrupt the Sinaloa cartel, cracking down on its kingpins, El Mayo and El Chapo, causing this infighting between the very cartel, causing it to fraction and eventually sort of fall. And then also, El Chapo's sons get this incredible plea deal in the US. 17 family members receive visas, cross into the US, have protection. The absence and sort of silence of these two kingpins intensifies this power struggle. Where I have a problem with this is the fact that in spite of all of this happening and authorities maintaining this kingpin strategy, you see the CJ&G, one of the most powerful and expansionist cartels, make an alliance with the Chapitos faction of the Sinaloa cartel. This is exactly what I mean when I say the kingpin strategy is a failure, because it breeds a hydra. You chop off the head and two bigger, badder ones grow back. Because it would be absolutely ridiculous to believe that this alliance won't lead to CJ&G having control of Sinaloa once the Sinaloa cartel has completely dissolved itself. These cartel killings, particularly what we're seeing in Sinaloa, are extremely theatrical. Like it's theatrical level brutality. Sorry, I think today's my first time on earth speaking English and speaking. Now, this level of violence signals dominance, especially with the way that these individuals send their messages, whether it's by using the sombreros, the white hats, the pizza boxes, chopping off the heads, pulling down the pants, scattering the extremities in different areas as opposed to the body. When these victims are displayed or like arranged in these stylized ways, it's a form of propaganda. And I've spoken about this before. And I've spoken about how I feel that there's this lack of crackdown on cartel propaganda, because it is, in my opinion, is highly valuable for those of you that will question it. In my opinion, these are ways for them to invoke absolute fear in the public, assert dominance against federal and global authorities, and also, I say this time and time again, it's a game of catch me if you can. And who can flex bigger muscles than the very organizations responsible for the transnational global drug trade, the death toll that is in the hundreds of thousands just in Mexico, okay, due to cartel violence. And yet they're putting on these public displays of violence, and rarely is anyone getting charged for it. And then you have the family members, basically the entire freaking family of a major drug cartel receiving immunity in the United States. Who is winning this war? You tell me. Just so you guys know, the death toll in Mexico has, since 2006, is more than 500,000 people. And there's nearly 200,000 that we know of, people who have gone missing in Mexico. Okay, and this is why this topic makes me so passionate, because we're not just talking about some movie-style narcos and this glamorized idea of how these groups operate. It's about the people in between. You know, they're not on one side or the other. They're not with the authorities. They're not with the cartels. They are regular people living their lives, and they are nameless victims of this war that has been going on for the longest time. Because the kingpin strategy, keep in mind, was implemented in 2006 by President Felipe Calderón. And that has been the strategy since. I mean, it's switched up a bit with the abrazos no balazos, hugs not bullets during AMLO. But for the most part, especially when we're talking about United States intervention, which is very prevalent, it's about getting the guy at the top in hopes that the rest of the totem pole crashes down. But what's happening while that totem pole is crashing down is another one that's even bigger, more sturdy, more powerful, is being built right next to it. Now, if we look at the hugs not bullets strategy, because I wanted to get into this a little bit more, especially when we're doing something like this, where 20 bodies in one day are found.